Welcome again to the Beyond Keywords Optimizing for Generative AI Search webinar. Today we'll be just kind of talking through some of the shifts that we see happening in the world of search, moving from kind of traditional SEO into AI, specifically in relation to content and ways that firms can be kind of keeping an eye on things that are happening there and staying ahead of the curve. Um, One of the things that I do want to just go ahead and mention before we dive in is our upcoming webinar in July. It is called a data-driven analysis of digital visibility across the AmLaw 200. We will be actually releasing our annual AmLaw report around that same time and then going over some of the insights from that report. We took a really deep dive into movements and how firms moved up or moved down in that list in comparison to some of their overall marketing strategies, specifically in relation to digital. I know we found some really interesting insights in that report, and we're really looking forward to sharing that with everyone. So I'll be sure to drop the link for signing up for that webinar in our chat, and feel free to go ahead and do that. So I want to kick things off today with just a quick little introduction of kind of an overview of AI and search and what the current landscape looks like right now. So for anyone that has been doing SEO at their firm for a little bit now, we're definitely seeing a big change in terms of strategy and the way that firms need to be approaching their digital marketing in order to have visibility in search. AI really started kind of taking off in 2023, 2024. Around May 2024 is when we saw Google launch AI overviews, which fundamentally changed what search results look like and how people started engaging with AI. Throughout the course of 2024, we saw OpenAI launch ChatGPT, as well as that getting integrated into lots of other tools in different areas in the SEO world, as well as kind of internally at law firms as well. AI overviews very quickly started taking off. Originally, I think some early studies around November, we're seeing those showing up in 30% of searches, and that number has continued to increase. And I think as of 2025, ChatGPT had over 400 million weekly active users. So this stuff is growing exponentially. It's changing almost every day, it seems, and becoming a bigger piece of the puzzle in terms of your marketing and ways that your firm can be found online. I think I pulled some stats from June, so this month of 2025, just to see kind of what things were looking like, not only for ChatGPT, but some of the other popular AI tools like Perplexity and Claude, and kind of what their market share is looking like. And ChatGPT was up at about 60%, Microsoft Copilot at 14%, Perplexity was at 6%, and Claude at 3%. So these tools are growing quickly. The adoption rate is picking up very fast. So I'd love, Taylor, just to kind of dive in. If you want to touch on what some of the key differences are between the way that we have traditionally approached SEO versus some of the GEO, so generative engine optimization that we're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first key difference is what you're optimizing for. So with traditional keyword-based SEO, you're optimizing for ranking in organic search results. Think of it as what we like to call the 10 blue links. You want to rank number one in those results. Whereas GEO, you're optimizing for inclusion in AI-generated summaries and answers. Um, Another difference is what you're focusing on. So traditional keyword-based SEO, you're focusing on the keywords, your metadata, your backlinks, and your user experience. Whereas with GEO, the big focus is on you want to produce clear, authoritative, well-structured content, so it can show up in those AI-generated summaries. And then lastly, it's what you're competing for. So for traditional keyword-based SEO, you're competing for clicks to your website, whereas with a focus on GEO, you're competing for visibility within those AI-generated summaries, citations, the source links. It is worth noting, though, when you are optimizing for one, you're typically optimizing for another. There was a research study that just came out that showed that sources cited in Google's AI reviews matched one or more of the top 10 organic, those like traditional 10 blue links, search results 99.5% of the time. So if you are already focused on traditional SEO, we'll call it, you're in a really good place to also be performing well for GEO with a few slight tweaks, which we'll get into a little bit later, but those are some of the key differences between the two.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. Ryland, I'll kick it over to you. We're talking about traditional SEO and AI. Why do firms need to adapt to this shift that we're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, great question. So law firms these days need to adapt because traditional SEO really isn't enough anymore. Kind of how we already talked about that. But ranking well on Google doesn't guarantee visibility in AI generated answers. Platforms like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, kind of already touched on those, summarize content directly, often without showing multiple source links. There are a few instances where we've seen where we type in a question in Google and it shows it pulling from, 3 or 4 pages. But the shift means that, if the firm's content isn't structured and optimized for AI, it risks becoming invisible to prospective clients who are, as we've seen, increasingly over time now using these tools to ask legal questions. Uh, GEO ensures that content becomes the trusted source used in AI summaries. While many of these AI models still reference top ranking pages, they only do so if the content is authoritative, structured, and easy to use and like parsed through the engines that they're using. Uh, so without the adaptation, law firms miss a growing opportunity to build visibility, credibility, and trust in like this hugely changing landscape, especially over the last year since it launched in May.
Awesome. Yeah. It's interesting. We've touched on this a little bit in terms of some of the overlap between SEO and GEO. But let's get into the weeds a little bit more on the GEO side. So what factors do generative engines use to determine what they're going to show in results? You touched a little bit on how there are some parts of SEO in terms of factors that these engines are using as well. But what specifically in relation to the generative engines can we be looking for and optimizing to try to increase the firm's visibility?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. And specifically in relation to content, since that's kind of what we're focusing on here for the sake of today. There are a few main factors that you want to consider and think about when you are generating content for your firm's website. The first one is making sure that your content is showing EEAT. If you've joined a webinar of ours before, you've probably heard us say this a gajillion times. But what that stands for is experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So you want to make sure that those trust signals are displayed throughout your content because AI bots are looking at that as well. You also want to make sure that your content is in depth. You want to make sure that you're starting concise and then you're going into the details because the way these AI crawlers are looking at your content is they're looking at it in chunks. You'll notice that the AI reviews and even stuff from ChatGPT is pulling pieces from individual pages and parsing them together. So you want to make sure that each little bit of your page is optimized properly, so that the AI crawlers can understand what you're saying and hopefully take that and show it in what they're showing the end user. In addition, another piece of the in-depth content part is also making sure that you're using headings to break up large chunks of content. One, that provides a great user experience because people can skim the page and find exactly what they're looking for, but you get the same benefits from an AI crawler. They can also easily crawl through your page and identify different sections that you talk about without having to sift through like giant pieces of text. Another factor which has become increasingly important with GEO and AI search is user intent and semantic understanding. So you want to make sure that you're writing your content and you're understanding what the searcher is intending to find, and you want to tailor your content to address their needs directly. Again, this also ties into a positive user experience as well as helping you show up with these AI results as well. Another big thing is utilizing natural language. Specifically with AI bots, again, you want to write your content so it's conversational and using language that you would use in everyday life. With law firm content, especially if your attorneys are writing, they can sometimes use a lot of technical language, maybe that they would use back in law school that a typical layperson may not understand. So just make sure that you're not getting too technical in the terms if you don't have to. Obviously, keep your target audience member in mind. If you're a B2B firm, make sure that you are keeping in mind that you're likely talking with other business professionals, so you can use a little bit more sophisticated language. But again, don't get too technical and remember to try to use natural language so that the AI crawlers can understand a little bit better. Additionally, you want to make sure that your content is regularly updated. Freshness has been a really important piece of this whole AI puzzle. So going back and if there were any like law changes or things like that, and you need to edit content for freshness, be sure that you're doing that. We typically recommend auditing at least your blog content once a year, and then your service page content you should be auditing periodically as well to make sure that everything is up to date. If anything's changed with the services that you offer, things like that. So just making sure that your content is fresh and up to date. And then lastly, structured data has been really important. It's also called schema. And basically, what this is, it's a very technical aspect of this whole picture of things. But structured data is essentially a small piece of code that lives on the back end of your website. And it basically helps the crawlers understand what your content is about. And it has actually been proven in studies about GEO and AI search to help improve the visibility within those engines. So making sure that your website does have structured data can also help improve that visibility. And now I will step off my soapbox because I just ranted for like 5 minutes straight.
Ryland, anything that you want to add to that kind of list of factors that Taylor mentioned?
Uh, yeah, it's hard to follow up with that. I think the only thing that I would say additionally to it is topic clustering. I think so building a network of related pages around like a core subject, for example. So if your law firm works in IP litigation, right, and you have a page on, trademarks or something like that, making, setting up additional content to enhance your topical authority about that certain subject matter is huge as well. So the combination of like the structure, recency, depth of signals with AI, that the content is authoritative and relevant, typically will increase your chance of being included in like summarized responses. I will say for like, and this is a kind of like just like a metaphor for the content. Say you have like you're going to like a golf tournament on like a Sunday, right? And you go to Google and you put in, what's the best golf t-shirt to buy, for like price, fit, feel, whatever. You're looking for specific factors, and you get this AI generated response where it goes, "Oh, Nike's number one." Well, you already own 6 or 7 Nike shirts. You don't really want that, so you hit into like that additional, drop down for the AI overview to see what else is in there, and then you start getting more into like, okay, what are these other brands? What do they have? You start doing your own research. If you apply that to law firms and like you're thinking of how you actually adapt the content on your website, making it more user friendly and more user focused of like come at it from a user's perspective, like put yourself in a client's shoes, a potential client that might want to hire you for your services. What are they searching? How are they actually going to go into Google and type something up? If are they going to search, how do I, patent something, or how do I, best lawyer for near me for XYZ PI attorney, whatever it is, come at it from a potential client's perspective rather than a lawyer's perspective. I know that might be harder or easier said than done, but we've seen it, leaps and bounds increase traffic over time with the amount of like content calendars and things we do for our clients. We're gonna make it very more user focused rather than lawyer to lawyer focus, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. Taylor, I want to go back to something you mentioned. So you touched on EEAT. We had a question come in. What are examples of trust signals and ways that you can kind of boost and make sure that you are having EAT on your page?
Yeah. So some examples, statistics are a really good one. If there's any relevant like studies that make sense, it's more relevant for blogs in that case. Also, if you're citing back and adding external links to authoritative sites, for example, if you cite like recent case law that just happened, or you're talking about a case, you can cite back either to the relevant case law page, or if there's like a news article on it from like the New York Times, let's say, that can also help boost the trust signals. Also, adding in specific examples where you can say, like, we had a client and we helped them with XYZ. Providing actual personable case study examples also helps show those trust signals within your piece of content as well.
Mhm. Yeah, a couple of things I'll add to that too. I think, case results, client testimonials are another great way, as well as any accreditations that you or the attorneys may have. Having that on the pages as well just kind of helps, again, establish the authority and the experience and the expertise that you have in the field. Um, so I think that that will be really important. We have a couple of other questions coming in, so I'll take a look at those and see where those fit in. But in the meantime, I wanted to go ahead and pose another question to you, Taylor. So we talked a little bit about kind of the way that this is being integrated into search results. And Ryland kind of gave, a real world example of seeing an AI overview and kind of what that looks like from a user's perspective. So what are we seeing in terms of differences in user behavior between traditional search and AI search?
Yeah, so some differences, specifically with AI, it's triggering more for informational searches. So think the things that you're writing your blogs about, such as like, this is super basic, but what goes into an estate plan, something like that. So more longer tail keyword searches are what the AI search is being used for. Whereas traditional search, people still look for shorter term keywords. For example, like your more conversion-based keywords are typically what's still showing up for those traditional searches, such as like employment defense attorney, people looking for specific services. So I would say that's like the biggest difference between user behavior. It's more of like the short tail searches versus long informational based searches.
Gotcha. Ryland, anything that you would want to add to that?
Yeah. So in specifically for like user behavior in traditional search versus AI search, I mean, we all know what it is now, right? People you used to, I mean, still kind of do, type in things, look at the links, see what's one catches their eye, clicks on it, goes to that page. Now, obviously, with the AI overview, they're getting one, typically concise answer, typically in like before they even have to hit the view more button. So we're saying that like, we are increasingly satisfied with the concise, authoritative responses that I get from answers from like ChatGPT. So it reduces the need for further exploration, which is kind of a topic we're going to talk about today as well, where people just aren't clicking on Practice area pages, service pages, blogs as much as they used to. So as a result, law firms now need to adapt to compete for inclusion in the AI generated answer itself, not just for a spot on the search results page. Yes, being, within the positions one, two, three, still very good. But we want law firms now to get cited and summarized by AI, just because this has become kind of like the new benchmark for visibility almost, particularly for like high intent research driven legal queries. It shifts. The shift has been significant, because it reduces the visibility opportunities unless content is structured and optimized with AI in mind for like its interpretation. So having that like content on the page being very concise, being having AI being able to parse through it, a myriad of other factors, but things we've covered today are like, the key components as to get your page summarized and put into the AI overview.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think an interesting trend that we're seeing that I've seen and referenced in multiple articles recently as people are, studying some of the changes that are happening in relation to this. One of the kind of thought processes in studies that have been referenced quite often is the way that these AI answers are addressing questions and long tail searches, like you've been mentioning, and how that's leading to kind of more qualified traffic once the person does actually make it to the site. I think one of the studies that I saw recently said that AI search converts 23 times better than traditional search. And I think that is largely due to the fact that people can do that kind of discovery and exploration piece within the chat with the AI and kind of do that learning phase earlier on before they decide, okay, now I'm ready to actually contact a firm. At which point they get to your site and they're almost pre-qualified in a sense at that point. Um, we've had a couple more questions come in, and I promise we'll get to some of these to the end if they don't fit easily into some of the topics. But one of them is specifically related to something you said, Taylor, about, staying using concise answers in the content. The question was, could you elaborate on what you mean by start concise when creating content? Should we open with concise copy and expand into more detail later in the piece, or aim to stay concise throughout the entire article?
Good question. So when it comes to staying concise and then going further in depth, a good example of this would be, I would say you'd want to do it throughout. So, for example, you would have your heading, whatever that may be, and then you would restate the question at hand, give a brief answer, and then you would dive into the details of it. Um, I'm trying to think of like an example off the top of my head. Something super simple like I have estate planning top of mind for some reason today. But like, when do you need to create an estate plan? You would say you should create an estate plan. You can create an estate plan at any age. You don't have to hit a certain milestone. It's important to have it, whatever, at X stage of life. And then you restated the question, you answered it briefly, and now you can go into the details a little bit more. So I would say it's something that you're doing throughout, um, not like start concise and then go in depth like later on. You want to like start concise, then build upon it, and then as you work through each section, you would do that throughout the page.
Yeah. And that makes sense with what we see with the AI overview answers, going back to what we were saying about kind of thinking about your content not only as one page, but also the individual sections, since AI is looking to just pull pieces from your article. So making sure that you have those concise answers for each section that kind of work together for the piece as a whole, I think is a great way to go about it. So we've talked a lot about kind of what these engines are looking for in terms of their models. What strategies can law firms use to increase their chances of showing up here? We touched on some of the factors that the AI search engines are looking for, but how can law firms apply this specifically? And Taylor, I'll throw that to you to start.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say, and this is something that Rylan mentioned a bit earlier, but you want to build your topical authority. And he mentioned topic clustering is the best way to do that. So you want to become the known source on the information for the practice area or the practice areas that you want to promote visibility on. A good example of this is like if you're an employment law firm serving employers you want to create your different topic clusters around that practice area. So one could be employment litigation defense. You would build different pieces of content to support that, such as you would have like blog topics around discrimination, wage and hour, whatever else your firm practices around employment litigation defense. So you can build up that topical authority and become a known source for information around that topic. That's super important. Additionally, we also kind of touched upon this a bit earlier, but creating AI-friendly content. So again, making sure you have that in-depth content. It's broken up by headers, using that natural language. Feel free to use bulleted lists again to make it easier to skim and parse through. Making sure you don't have these ginormous paragraphs or block of text, breaking those up so that the AI crawlers and even humans can easily skim through whatever it is that you're creating. And then additionally, something that has been growing in like super importance is digital PR and backlinking. So traditional backlinking has always been part of SEO strategies. But something that is really growing, especially with AI, is digital PR. So I'd like to think of it as like an enhanced form of backlinking, because it's not such a huge focus on getting a link back to the site, even though that's great and still really good for traditional SEO and boosting the authority of your site as a whole. But what we're noticing with AI specifically is that when your brand is frequently mentioned in high quality, trustworthy content, it does actually increase the likelihood of AI models recognizing and including your brand within their responses. So it's really important that you are building your digital presence across the web as a whole. So making sure that, you have guest blogs going out there or your attorneys are providing quotes to journalists that are being featured in different types of high authority publications, because those do help, not just with traditional SEO, as I'll call it, but also with showing up in those AI responses as well.
Gotcha. I'll tie a part B to that question, and I'll throw this to you, Ryland. It actually came in through the Q&A. Is there a difference in how you optimize for LLMs versus the AI overviews?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few things. So what I'll say, kind of piggybacking on what Taylor just went over, when you're optimizing for LLMs versus AI reviews, no, not really. There's not much that of a difference because the AI review is pulling from an LLM. It's kind of one and the same. Uh, there are a few extra things you can do on top of kind of what Taylor mentioned. The topic clusters is huge. That one and digital PR and backlinking still very, very, very valuable. Uh, the way that you format your content on your website now is a key factor in getting and like optimizing for LLMs and AI overviews. So you still do everything kind of what we're talking about today the same, because it'll be pulled. It pulls from the LLM into the AI overview onto Google's kind of like just UI of how they present the information. Uh, so that being said, the use of headers correctly, H2s and H3s, keeping paragraphs relatively medium to short, and maintaining a conversational tone is huge. Um, the last part that I'll kind of talk about too is if you go onto ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity now, and you search up something that maybe refers to a specific law firm, law firms that are optimizing for both SEO and GEO at this point are already being set on AI platforms. So, I can find, law firms' names in the LLM itself. If I go to ChatGPT today and I type in, what's the best lawyer in X state for doing XYZ, it typically will give you like an actual law firm's name. So it's more of a avenue now to actually bring in, real client leads and case intakes rather than just being placed into Google's like UI of how they present the information to you. It's actually like an attribution factor now to getting real world clients. So to answer the question, it's one and the same. You still want to make your content optimized, kind of how we're talking about today, to be placed in the AI overview, because then you're going to be placed in the LLM altogether.
Gotcha. Both of you have touched on topic clusters quite a bit. Is there a particular type of thought leadership that you see be more effective than others? And this came in through the Q&A as well. Their question specifically was, is one type of thought leadership, whether it's blogs, client alerts, bios. Someone also asked about video content. Are any of those more effective than another when it comes to showing up in AI search results versus traditional results?
Yeah,
Um,
I'll take the first swing at this, Taylor.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wouldn't look at it as a thought leadership exercise. You might want to look at it as a numbers game now. So if you have, for example, a practice area page that you just went live, you're doing this new thing at your law firm, a new service for clients, and you want to, promote it across your website with your existing domain authority and your expertise online, right? Rather than looking at it where, oh, I'm going to make 5 blogs about it and we're going to do a, client alert and add it to somebody's bio. It's more of what pages are going to provide the most, authority to help boost this now new page. So rather than looking at it of like different avenues to take, look at it as a numbers game of, is your blog going to perform better than a client alert or adding it to a bio page or a new bio? Then that's kind of like the avenue you want to take now. Uh, and to figure that information out, I mean, you can just look at J4, Search Console, or whatever tools you're using to track, your own traffic coming in, because it'll give you a pretty good, clear indication of what works well on your website and what can help that new, prop up that new service page or practice.
I
Anything?
will.
Yeah, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was gonna say, I will also add on, specifically what I'm seeing is more blog related content performing well in the AI searches because those are people asking like more informational questions. So like, what is X or what's the difference between X, Y, and Z? People just looking for general information, and that's what's one triggering the AI reviews within Google, and also I feel like what people are typically searching within like ChatGPT and things like that, like just questions to informational things that they're looking to find. So if I had to pick like one type of thought leadership, that's most effective, honestly, in both AI search and even traditional results, I would go with blogs. They would be the most effective in showing up in those AI reviews and even showing up in those traditional results. Because we've seen it where we have a lot of client blogs that they are actually decreasing in clicks, but it's because they are showing up in the AIO reviews instead. And we've actually seen that they're showing up in both the AIO review and within the traditional results. And it's typically for blog type thought leadership content.
Yeah, that's a huge trend that we're seeing right now, and is also being referenced in a lot of studies as well, is zero-click searches and how so many websites are seeing increases in impressions, but are actually seeing declines when it comes to clicks because of users finding their answer directly in the AI overview and then not having to make their way to the website to actually get the information that they're looking for. Um, One thing that I would add to that question that's not necessarily thought leadership, but still something that I think has become increasingly important and was often kind of pushed to the side or ignored historically, is your firm's about page as well as your attorney bios. When it comes to understanding who the firm is, and again, going back to EAT, those pages have become increasingly important, making sure that those accurately represent the authority and the experience and the expertise of the firm, is really important. And the AIs can pull that information as well and can kind of tie that information to the practice areas that you're offering and talking about on the site as well. So that's another great way to kind of fully leverage those pages and again boost some of the EEAT on your site. Um, we had a question come in about headings, and I'll throw this to you, Ryland. The formatting of our H2s and H3s on our website are not great for thought leadership pieces, so we typically start with our H4 as the main heading. Does this harm optimization in any way?
H4 is the main heading. Does that mean that they're using like H4 as a title or?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it sounds like they're using H4 for the main heading as opposed to using potentially H1, they specifically mentioned instead of H2 and H3.
Gotcha. Yeah, you would want to put it as an H1. So the way that headings work is essentially just a tool. Like, yeah, you can see the UI UX on the page of like big text and then smaller text that kind of just goes with the flow. But the main purpose of headings and their categories is that so that Google can see what's the title of your page, what are the main topics of like things you're answering, and then what are those subtopics. So H1 being the title, H2 being like the main things you're talking about, H3 is going within H2's about being the same kind of like topic, but definitely another part that is kind of like parsed out within that same subtopic. So you can kind of think about it if you open up a Word doc and you put in bullet points, type something, hit enter, and then hit tab, right? You can see that's like a sub of it. It's kind of just like three sub levels. Um, so I wouldn't start with an H4 or leave an H4 as your main heading. If you're having trouble coming up with topics, I mean, use AI. That's it's a great tool to use to like, help you with a topic, or like the topic title. But yeah, so I wouldn't want to leave that, for a long time if that's how you're currently doing it. You want to post or have it structured as just H1s, H2s, H3s, and then H4s are like subs, which we rarely ever use. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know this person specifically mentioned that it sounds like it stems from a formatting issue of their H2s and H3s. So that's something that I
Mm,
would potentially recommend just discussing with your developer to see if maybe some changes could be made there, so that you are able to utilize those headings appropriately. We've had a
yeah.
couple more questions come in related to actually the next section of what we were planning to cover. So I'll jump into this topic, and Taylor, if you want to kick us off.
Mhm.
What new metrics and tools kind of measure this AI search visibility that we've been talking about, and how can firms gauge their performance beyond traditional rankings?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that Jordana actually mentioned earlier is that impressions are actually becoming relevant again. We used to look at them as a vanity metric because it's like, oh, great, you had an impression, but like, what happened? Um, so impressions in Search Console specifically, if you don't have Search Console set up, definitely recommend having that. It's a free Google tool. It shows your traffic within Google search results. So what we're noticing is impressions are on the rise, but clicks are decreasing. And that's because the impressions are actually showing when you show up in AI overviews within Google. Unfortunately, you cannot parse it out yet. So you can't like differentiate between, oh, I had X amount of impressions in the AI overviews versus the traditional search results. But hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe we'll have that in the near future. That would be great. Um, so just looking at Search Console and seeing if you're noticing that trend, it's pretty obvious, so you should see it right away. We've actually seen it across the board with all of our clients. Specifically looking at year over year, it's been the most dramatic, with those clicks decreasing, but those impressions rising significantly, again, because of the AI overviews. Additionally, there is a way that you can actually add an AI tools channel within Google Analytics. Um, if you just like Google how to do it, there should be like an article that shows you how to set it up. It's relatively simple. And basically, what this will do is it'll set up a channel source for all the AI tools. It includes like pretty much all of them. But it involves like most of the most popular ones like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude is in there. There's a bunch of them. And basically, what it will do is it'll show you the traffic from those AI tools that you're getting to your website. Without that setup, you can actually already see them. Usually, they're under referral or unassigned, is the two places that I've seen them most. So if you play around in GA4 within those channels, you can see the breakdown of the AI traffic that you're getting. But if you set up this channel, this AI source channel tracking, it puts it into one simple bucket so you don't have to kind of dig through both of those referral and unassigned channels. Also, a subtle plug for call rail and call tracking. Um, if you have that set up, CallRail specifically, a handful of our clients use that, and what we're noticing is it does actually have those AI sources attributing to calls. I've specifically seen a handful come from like Search GPT, which is pretty neat. So you'll actually be able to attribute phone calls that you've gotten from those channels. Um, and then additionally, other SEO tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, they're all adapting their tools to account for this AI traffic and traffic from LLMs. Um, those are paid tools, unfortunately. You can't use those for free. I think they have free aspects to them, but the AI stuff that they're adding, I know, is an additional cost. So if you're curious about that, I'm sure they have like free trials and things like that. But Ahrefs added a brand radar, which allows you to see how many times your brand is mentioned within. I think they just have AI overviews now, but they're looking to add like ChatGPT and things like that in the future because it is a relatively new tool. And then I know SEMrush also added an AI feature fairly recently as well. There are also other tools that do come at a cost. One that I know measures LLM traffic and like brand visibility specifically is one called Profound, which is a pretty cool tool and it's also fairly new. But again, that comes at an extra cost. But those are some of the ways that you can start measuring that stuff. Some free and some not. I wouldn't be surprised if over the next few months to a year, we see even more tools come out. As Google hopefully gets more transparent with AA overview traffic and things like that. Hopefully we get more clarity because right now it is kind of like a black box. Like you can assume that you're getting traffic and you can see some of it, but it's hard to like fully show attribution, at least with the free tools that Google has and is providing.
Gotcha. On a related note, one of the questions that came in was, do you have any recommendations for how to monitor or audit what AI and LLMs are saying about our company? Specifically, how can we assess our visibility, which we touched on, and understand the sentiment they're portraying? So I guess if you wanted to know more about what these search engines are saying about your firm, how would you recommend going about that?
I mean, I would say simplest and easiest thing is to just ask it.
Yeah.
Go to ChatGPT and ask it about your firm, and see what it says. You can even do like generic searches just to see if you show up, like best law firm in X area or best law firm for this X practice area, and just play around with it and see what it spits out. That's probably the easiest way without like a tool, just to see what the LLMs are saying about your company and what they think about you.
Yeah, and I think that question also ties into what I was saying about, your firm's about page and the attorney bios. A lot of times it's looking at those pages to understand your brand and your firm, and that's often what they pull from in queries where they're talking about you. So that's a great way to just kind of make sure that what you would want to be portrayed is on those pages so that it's there as an option for the AIs to pull from. Um, Ryland, I'll kick a question over to you. So we've talked a good bit about, traditional SEO and GEO. How can firms balance the traditional SEO efforts that they have been making with GEO and kind of testing AI search success?
Yeah, I mean, so tracking the success portion, I mean, Taylor covered pretty much mostly all of it. GA4, like she said, so setting up the right traffic channels in GA4 to actually parse out anything AI related is huge. We started doing that with our clients as well in their GA4 accounts, and we can now start seeing what's actually coming through clicks wise. The impressions thing is still up in the air, just like Taylor said before. Um, some things to keep in mind as well, keyword rankings still matter. They don't reflect your visibility within AI generated answers, but they still do matter for traditional SEO. Uh, and yeah, I mean, there's a few things like the call rail portion that Taylor went through is huge. The search GPT and like similar AI engines as referral sources can help, track lead attribution. The Ahrefs brand radar is huge. I know SEMrush specifically now has like an AI toolkit that just came out. They have a bunch of different like, third-party programs that are within SEMrush's banner that are all for AI tracking. To help things with like visibility, what pages are suffering the most on your website. Obviously, these are not free tools, but you can look into them if you have a SEMrush account. Um, yeah, we see tons of tools coming out within these sectors that are helping tell clients like, hey, this page isn't set up properly for AI, or hey, here are your competitors and how they're beating you in the AI overview. Um, so there are quite a few tools now for the AI section of it. Traditional SEO, like there's still some moving parts, not as much though as like the GEO portion.
Got it. Awesome. Um, so kind of moving into a future proofing strategy, any predictions on future changes that you guys expect to see in AI search as it continues to evolve? I know we mentioned this at the beginning. I feel like this stuff is changing every day. Any predictions on kind of what that will look like as we continue moving forward?
Yeah. So AI search is going to just continue to evolve quickly, as we all kind of can pretty much guess for the next foreseeable future. So your strategy also needs to change. If you're just doing traditional, you're still going to be, ranking only in traditional way. But we should start expecting more AI generated answers to eventually include maybe like ads or sponsor placements as well. It is quite funny somewhat that Google has PPC, but also now this AI overview. So they're kind of directly competing against each other, but it is nice to compete against yourself if you're both one and two. Um, so just like traditional search with ads or placements, that could be a thing going forward. Content strategy should be built for flexibility. Using content structures and formats that can adapt to voice search is huge as well, especially since mobile search is like the number one. Multi-module AI tools and chatbot interfaces we've seen as well. Staying current on AI updates because, I mean, Jordanna, Taylor, and I just this morning read an article on something that would just came out that's gonna now, help us pivot some of our clients content strategy wise, and we're gonna, A/B test things, but you never know what's gonna be coming out with it. So staying on top of the updates in the news, especially from Google and OpenAI, since they're like the number one, number two, um, partners bringing together the like this whole AI overview thing. So something even as small as like you know how the content is sourced, for example. So working with an agency or having a dedicated internal process to track these developments to help your firm stay ahead is huge. Early adopters of like the GEO, and strategies internally or with an agency are going to gain pretty long-term visibility and trust signals that will be increasingly hard to replicate later. Because imagine the first, people now that are ranking number one to five in like just overall US based law firms, it's very hard to compete against them, regardless of like their size, just their authority online. So getting early on it with a GEO strategy is your best bet.
Awesome. Taylor, anything you want to add in terms of how firms can continue to prepare their digital strategies for the future?
Yeah, I will also just add, just play around with all of the different LLMs, like get familiar with ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, at least the main ones that are generating the most market share and what people are using. Because while they are all LLMs, they all do work in like slightly different ways. So just understanding how they think and how users are utilizing each LLM or like what people prefer is going to be super important. And then I'll also just reiterate what Ryland said. Like things are literally changing every day, every hour. So just make sure that you're staying on top of things and understanding what changes are happening, what different ways you can measure things. Like we mentioned before, like Google is starting to adjust their tools so we can start being more transparent with what's happening with AI reviews. Like just a couple of days ago, they announced that their new AI mode traffic was going to show in Search Console. So just making sure that you're being really diligent on staying up to date of what's going on, not just within Google itself, but also with ChatGPT and things like that, because those are also changing constantly as well. Like I know a couple months ago, um, I think that ChatGPT has like a Shopify integration now or something like that. Um, so there are things within that that's changing as well that you need to be aware of. Shopify obviously doesn't impact law firms, but they could change something tomorrow that impacts law firms. So just staying on top of what's going on and making sure that you're being a student of the LLMs as they evolve.
Yeah. Yeah, I know one of my predictions that I think I've mentioned on a past webinar is I'm waiting for them to introduce ads into the AI overviews on Google's end or also into places like ChatGPT. And I think ChatGPT actually made a comment about that not too long ago of having additional kind of paid models. So it will definitely be interesting to see if that gets introduced in the near future as well into some of these tools. Um, I want to save these last few minutes for kind of a Q&A session. We have a couple of questions that have come in that I want to make sure that we get to. So one of the first ones, how do you optimize content for Meta AI?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be the same as all the other LLMs. Well, Taylor's correct that they all like the interfaces are different for most LLMs and like some of them work in slightly different ways. Most of them, if not all of them at this point, are pulling something from ChatGPT just because not because it's an early adopter, but because it's the most robust LLM. So if you're optimizing for ChatGPT, Perplexity, you name it, you're going to be optimizing yourself for Meta AI as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think Meta Meta would be interesting too in terms of testing some other formats as
Hmm.
opposed to just text, just due to the nature of Meta platforms and kind of what
Hmm.
they show. Which actually ties into another question that someone asked, which is what additional changes in advertising formats do we need to start considering? Things like video, animations, etc. So I think that kind of applies to both of these questions in terms of we're all still learning, and a lot of it is just testing and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I think Meta AI specifically, or any Meta advertising, would be a really interesting place to try some of those other formats, things like videos, animations, to see if you get more visibility out of those, since Meta platforms rely so heavily on kind of that type of media.
Hmm.
I will also add to the question about like changes in advertising. This doesn't really have to do with formats, but more just like making sure that you're diversifying your advertising. With all the uncertainty, you want to make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So making sure that you have a strong presence across all different advertising methods, whether that's SEO, PPC, YouTube, LinkedIn, social media, all that stuff. Um, and I've also seen recently people saying that like LinkedIn posts have been pulling into AI overviews. So just something to keep in mind to keep social media active as well.
We have another question, and I'm not 100% sure where this fits in. So, Catherine, if we don't fully address this, please feel free to drop it again. But her question was, can you attribute email to those GPT channels? I'm guessing that this came in when we were talking about setting up the channel for AI tools in GA4. So if you're asking about kind of the attribution of email in there, the answer would be yes, sort of. In terms of key events, that is something that you could set up for your site. So if on your website you have the option for the user to email in order to contact the firm or click on a phone number, anything like that, all of those can be set up as key events in your GA4 account. so that that way you would be able to see how many of those events are happening from any of the traffic that you're getting from that AI tool's source channel. And again, if that did not answer your question, please feel free to drop it again. In the meantime, one last question that we have in here that came in was kind of in relation to job search. So, any predictions on how recruiters need to adjust promoting roles? And I guess this would apply, on the law firm side as well, if they're listing jobs on their site for attorneys or any other staff. Any recommendations that you guys have on kind of how those could be set up to better promote those pages and those roles?
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Um, I guess I would say, I mean, the same kind of content rules would apply. I mean, in your job descriptions and your posting pages for promoting them. Specifically, I guess, in the realm of like GEO, if you want those to come up. I don't know how often people are searching for jobs like within ChatGPT. But I would say you could follow the same type of content strategies and rules that we talked about, making sure that you're using that natural language, breaking it up, um, and all the same strategies would apply to help the visibility of those within GEO.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for this webinar. We appreciate everybody joining today, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.